In the year 1977, the Cold War chilled the bones of men and machines alike. Deep beneath the surface of forgotten deserts and deeper secrets, something old began to stir, and a man rebuilt from fire would be the first to hear its whisper. They said he was the future. A man rebuilt from wreckage, $6 million in hardware beneath the skin of a pilot who didn't know how to die. Faster than a speeding jet, stronger than the engines that nearly destroyed him. But even the future can leave shadows behind. Sometimes the past comes humming through the wires. The year was 1977. The Cold War had settled into a deep, silent chill. In a windowless sub-basement beneath Washington, D.C., a machine blinked red for the first time in 13 years. No one noticed. Not right away. 3 days later, Colonel Steve Austin stood alone in the Nevada desert, squinting into a sun that refused to warm him. The sand cracked underfoot, brittle and forgotten. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. Something was wrong with the air. It tasted like ozone and old memory. They'd sent him to the proving grounds. What was left of them? A sun-bleached graveyard of abandoned prototypes and vaporized secrets. They told him a satellite had dropped signal near this sector, and they wanted eyes on the ground. Not just any eyes, his. But it wasn't a satellite they'd lost. It was a signal. A narrowband transmission, coded in a dialect of Soviet comms no one had used in over a decade. Repeating, continuous. Not a message, not exactly. More like a heartbeat. Dr. Rudy Wells had brushed it off. Echoes, maybe. Reflections from old Soviet birds drifting above the ionosphere. He called it noise. Steve wasn't so sure, because he hadn't heard it through a speaker. He'd heard it in his sleep. The blackout hit like a closing hand. 1 second, dim green light, the hum of dormant tech. The next, nothing. Not even the subtle whir of Steve Austin's internal gyros. The air grew still, thick, and the silence, it had weight. For a heartbeat, he didn't move. He let his bionic systems recalibrate in the dark. They did it without a sound, without a spark. His enhanced vision kicked in, only to reveal that there was no light to amplify. Whatever powered the facility had gone dark, but not the pod. It still stood in the center of the room, faintly visible in the faint thermal trail his sensors could just barely track. The silhouette of the man inside, sitting upright now, awake, watching. Steve took a step forward. There was no reaction. He circled the pod, slow, calculating. The frost on the glass was thinning, melting from within. Not from heat, but from body temperature. Organic systems coming online. Heartbeat faint, but steady. Brain activity erratic, but present. 13 years in silence. Then, this. He remembered Rudy's warning. We never figured out what they used as a neural interface, so their cybernetics weren't like ours. They didn't think about rejection. They didn't think about consent. Meaning, whoever was in that pod, he wasn't born bionic. He'd been forced into it. The eye inside tracked Steve's movement. Not curious, not surprised. More like recognition. Then it spoke. Not aloud, but through him. A voice curled in his skull like a bad memory, shaping words and frequencies only Steve's implants could hear. You're the new one. Steve froze. The pod hadn't opened. The mouth hadn't moved. But the voice was there, brittle, metallic, and somehow tired. They always send another. Better wiring. Cleaner code. More human. That's what they want, isn't it? A perfect weapon with a conscience. Steve's body tensed. Reflex. His training fought the panic. He didn't answer. He wasn't even sure how. Then the eye closed. and the locks on the pod released. The hiss of decompression was slow, steady, almost gentle, like steam escaping from a forgotten kettle. The pod lid cracked, lifted, and the thing inside stood up. Man-shaped, man-sized. But the proportions were wrong. The joints moved too smoothly. The neck turned without hesitation, like a turret. And when it stepped out, barefoot onto the steel floor, it didn't shiver. 13 years frozen, and it didn't shiver. Its chest bore a tattoo, faded ink over old scar tissue, Cyrillic letters, a unit number, a date, 1972. Steve didn't draw his weapon. Not yet. He waited. The prototype looked at him for a long time. Then it smiled, or tried to. The skin fought the motion, as though the face had forgotten how. "I was the first," it said aloud this time. The voice was flat, the tone too slow. "You are the 6th million." Steve didn't blink. "You're a dead program," Steve said. "You shouldn't even be breathing." The prototype stepped forward. "Neither should you." The space between them felt thin, not just air, time, as though the walls around them were struggling to hold back the past. Steve had faced faster things, stronger things, machines with teeth and killers with better aim. But this wasn't like any of that. The prototype moved with the patience of something not afraid to be hurt. He studied Steve the way a sculptor studies marble, with disappointment. "They made you elegant," the voice said. "No wires on the outside, no ports, no cables down your spine. They wanted to forget what we were." Steve stood his ground. "What were you?" "A test and a warning." The prototype circled him now, not in a fighting stance, no aggression, just motion, constant, observant. "I woke up too early. The interface wasn't ready. I screamed for 3 days. They said it was the metal rejecting my nerves. But it wasn't the metal. It was the code." "You were never decommissioned?" "No, I was buried. Like a bad idea. But I dreamed. I dreamed in static, in numbers, in signals that didn't come from them." Steve could feel it now too. The hum behind his teeth, a rhythm, not his own. "You picked up the signal. That means I'm still connected. You're already infected." "By what?" "The one they used to wake me up." It started in the left hand, a twitch. Half a second, maybe less. A stutter in the tendons where servo met sinew. He'd felt that twitch once before, years ago in the early trials, when the interface between man and machine hadn't quite settled. But this was different. This was external. His fingers closed without his command, then opened, then closed again. It was testing the controls. The prototype watched, not smiling now. Just still, observing, not moving to strike, because it didn't need to. Steve's HUD flickered. Words blinked in a language he didn't read. Not English, not Cyrillic, just symbols, glitches, something buried in the firmware. His arm dropped to his side. He didn't tell it to. And in that moment he understood. This wasn't just an old signal trying to wake something up. It was trying to replace him. He shut down external telemetry, cut the feedback loop, forced manual override. It hurt, like a migraine behind his bones, but it gave him back his right hand. The left refused. His vision feed warped. Snow, a forest, a launch silo. None of it real. Just bleeding data from a memory that wasn't his. The prototype lowered its head slightly. "You're the antenna," They built you to receive. And now something had tuned in. His knees buckled. He hit the floor hard. Vision strobed with failing diagnostics. Breathing, real and ragged, cut through the artificial fog. Muscle memory from a body that still belonged to him. For now. He reached behind his ear, not to rip out a wire, but to find the hard switch Rudy had buried in a safe place. Fail-safe only, for when the body wasn't responding. He'd never used it before. Now he had no choice. One press. His world went dark, not unconscious. Just disconnected. No sight, no sound, no readouts, no advantage. Just a man, flat on the floor, surrounded by metal and silence, and still breathing. That was enough. He forced his body up, blind, shaking, guided only by gravity and pain. The prototype was still there, watching, but no longer smiling. Because now, for the first time, it saw Steve for what he truly was. Not a machine, not a prototype, not a weapon, a man, still fighting. The weapon in Steve's hand didn't shake. It never did. His arm was rated for 10 times human strength, his reflexes 15 times faster than normal. But he didn't fire. Not because he couldn't, because the man in front of him was still a man. However much of him was left. The prototype didn't move. It watched him. Steve stepped back and saw it, a panel beneath his feet, hollow sounding. He ripped it up with bare hands. Inside, the core, not glowing, not dramatic, just a black box wired to what looked like a battery the size of a suitcase. Soviet era, shielded, still warm, still transmitting. Steve reached for it. The prototype stepped forward, not attacking, pleading. You don't know what's in there. I don't care. You'll destroy both of us. Then maybe they'll stop building more. He wrapped both hands around the core and pulled. The prototype lunged, too late. The core came free. Sparks jumped. The room shook. A low rumble rolled up through the floor, not an explosion, just a collapse. Something giving way. The prototype dropped to its knees, its systems failing, words slurring. You were supposed to carry it forward. Steve stood over him. Maybe the future doesn't need ghosts. The prototype looked up, blinking once. Slowly. Then it shut down. No drama. Just silence. Steve dropped the core beside the dead man, turned away, walked, limping, toward the shaft where he'd come in. Half the facility was crumbling behind him now. He climbed slowly, rung by rung, out of the hole, back into the heat, back into the sun, back into the sound of wind over sand. Later, days, maybe. He sat in a sterile OSI room. Oscar across the table. Rudy behind glass. There was no transmitter, Oscar said. No logs, Rudy added. No diagnostics. Whatever signal was there, it's gone now. Steve didn't argue. He just reached behind his ear. Flipped the failsafe back on. The hum didn't return, not right away, but he knew better. Some things don't stop. They wait. Clip 10. Epilogue. The wire remains. Intro. The final voice. The one that lingers. A warning, or maybe a whisper. The ghost in the circuit isn't gone, only silent. Script. They built him stronger, faster, better, but not everything they gave him was theirs to control. Not every voice in the circuit was speaking from this side of the wire. Some ghosts don't need to haunt the world. They just need a body to ride.